It's another retelling of the early days of the Avengers, and back in this, back over the many years, there's been a lot of retellings of the origin and the early days of Avengers. This isn't a new concept; it's happened over and over and over again, which is why Earth's Mightiest Heroes by Joe Casey wasn't the comic I was most excited about. But as it turned out, this comic did some new things. Let's get into that. Hey everybody, this is Perch. Looking at Earth's Mightiest Heroes by Joe Casey. Like I mentioned, this now at least claimed it was a limited series, 8 issues, and its kind of mission that it stated was that it was going to fill in some of the blanks of the Avengers history, but also go into a little bit more of the turmoil of the team. The early issues, especially the first 50 or so, there was a lot of kind of classic superhero action, but they didn't really get into a lot of the drama between the characters. Everything was more or less kept above board, kind of lightweight ribbing and everything. And so when comics took kind of a darker turn to like the fallout of the Hulk or Thor's, problems or Tony Stark's issues or, Hank Pym's problems, they came as a bit of a surprise, or at least they kind of came out of nowhere. This comic basically lays the seeds for all those things. And while this story has been done to death, this one brings some new stuff to it. So it's Joe Casey does a pretty solid job, all things considered. Scott Collins on the art. So this issue basically takes us right to kind of issue number 2 of the Avengers, where Tony Stark's hanging out. He hasn't upgraded his armor just yet. He's plugging himself into the little mini fridge. It's once again another case where the timeline doesn't quite match up what was going on at the time, but Marvel is trying to bring everything up a little bit. We check in on a bar where Clint Barton is basically pool sharking the other people who are there, winning some money, and we get it's nice to see an early view of Barton, where he is, he's saying, yeah, these guys are kind of scam artists, and you got to take them on, it sets up kind of the early behavior of the cocky, a little bit too sure of himself, a little bit too willing to break the law, Clint Barton here. But we get that little brief moment. Nice to see that set up as almost the first character. We saw Tony Stark and we saw Clint Barton. It's nice that they're kind of starting there. With all the damage done to Hawkeye over the last, say, 10 years, it's nice to see them returning at least to some of his original character roots here. They're just reminding that this guy wasn't always this moron doofus that was incapable of doing anything right. That Hawkeye definitely had his flaws, but there was positives to him. So we get to the Avengers Mansion, and they're having a meeting, and the meeting isn't going well. Tony Stark's kind of doing it business-wise. Hank's trying to listen. Thor's bored out of his mind. Hulk's, irritable. And they go back and forth, and they're trying to sign contracts. And right off the bat, it's like there's a lot of kind of silliness and so as they go back and forth, you see the divide of the people who are more into the logistics and the business, the Tony Starks, the Hank Pyms, and then you get the Hulks and the Thors who are just not really interested in any of that. And so immediately it turns into an argument with Hulk angry with Rick Jones and Iron Man kind of yelling at Hulk, and some of this would even come into play later with we see some of Tony Stark and Bruce Banner's histories that would some of them get revealed in the original sin, but then in other parts during the Marvel Universe. So not coming out of nowhere. So the Hulk immediately gets ready to smash some things up, and he's going to attack Iron Man, and Thor steps into the middle, and Hulk's like, I don't need any of this, and he bails. And this is, of course, happened in the original Avengers comic, but this gives more of the details of why the Hulk would get frustrated and leave after, saying he would join just one issue earlier, which is nice. It provides some additional explanation for why the characters were that way. And we see how Tony Stark is really trying to pull it all together and hold things on, but, it's hard with these people, and he just doesn't really think it's good. We get some nice stuff with Jarvis talking about how we have to find common ground and how do we make this mix of very eclectic characters work. So we move back to New Jersey, where Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp, are doing. We're hearing about Hank Pym being a workaholic and Jan being obsessed about her hair. and so they're a good couple. They're happy with each other, but you see some of the tension there of, who they are. We see some of Hank Pym's insecurity of feeling like he's not worth it. He's not important enough to be around some of the others. And we also get so then we flash over. We get Tony Stark's new armor, which gets a little bit more explanation as well, and we get some of the early tension with the government, and the fact that they, by having the Hulk on the team, it's creating some problems, and that's yet another interesting angle, because the Avengers kind of got on the wrong side of the government early on, and it was never entirely sure why. But of course, you could guess. I mean, by putting Hulk and some of these heavyweights on the team, it would create some mistrust, and that would carry over when Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver would join, and Hawkeye. So it was a good moment to really remind people that there were a lot of kind of underlying history reasons for why this went the way it went. So Iron Man pledges that he will go take care of the Hulk situation, and of course, when we see him next, the Hulk's throwing a train at the Avengers, and just basically flattens them. They manage to save some civilians, but the Hulk is not able to be taken. And so the Avengers are kind of licking their wounds in their weird submarine as they're going away, and Hank Pym is really angry, and he's throwing a little tantrum, and he shouts at Janet, "Don't patronize me," which is, of course, would lead to the problems Hank Pym would have. So they didn't come out of nowhere. We're establishing very early on that he's wound way too tight. The insecurity is there and everything else. Thor kind of gets in the middle to say, "Hey, you better show some respect." And this leads to a big argument between Thor and Iron Man and Hank and and just everybody's fighting, and they're disillusioned. They know they're not coming together. The Hulk's situation is making life worse. We're screwed. The alliance was made in haste, and it's just a bad idea. And they move right back into another kind of argument with the, we shouldn't be doing this. And Thor is hot, tempered, and he's ready to fight again. And so we're just seeing this as a very, very dysfunctional team. Something that, once again, we were kind of told in some of the Avengers issues, but we weren't shown. And with all the things going on with characters, coming and going, with the plot line with Namor and the Hulk, and then ultimately what happens in the comic, which would then happen in the regular Avengers comic too, a proximity alert comes on the sub, and there's something out there they can't believe. It's a figure frozen in ice, and it's Captain America. And that's how the first issue wraps. This comic would be pretty rich. I mean, it would go and really fill in some nice details. If you were coming first into the Avengers, you wouldn't want to read it this way. This would make the Avengers seem a lot less likable and a lot more dysfunctional than the team really was. But if you were a fan of the comic and you had read a lot of these early issues, this series was wonderful because it really provided some additional context, and it did fit. There was a decent job trying to reconcile kind of the different personality shifts and everything else that the comic would do, and make it entertaining for reading. So this is a good, solid series. If you're an Avengers fan, I would definitely recommend picking it up. Earth's Mightiest Heroes, 8-issue limited series by Joe Casey. And I think he does just a solid job of adding to the Avengers myths rather than just kind of regurgitating and retelling things. So definitely worth a look. But what did you think of it? Do you remember this comic? Did you get it? Were you fond of it? Is this history that you even really wanted or needed to be told? Leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Comic Perch. And of course, like, subscribe. How could I ever forget all that nonsense? Please do. But most importantly, thanks for listening.